7 of those sets contained at least one moonstone, which was pivotal to the story.
Pivotal.
And in the background story, the monsters are attempting to collect these moonstones to unleash doom on Earth by eclipsing the sun forever, allowing the land to be bathed in darkness, giving the monsters free roam to terrorize at will. The stones are based on the monsters contained in the respective set. And then there's a band of monster fighters led by Dr. Rodney Rathbone, who try to find the stones before the evil Lord Vampire uses them to eclipse the sun.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things LEGO from the perspective of two adult collectors. We're your co-host. I'm Grinch. And I'm West. And I am just kidding. Today, unfortunately, this week, West's daughter has been sick, so I may or may not be riding solo. I'm going to get through some of the episode, the exciting LEGO news, the brick mail, and all of that, and we'll see if West can join us. But if not, I will be your host today, Grinch, and we are diving deep into the spooky but fun world of monster fighters. It's spooky season, but before we get into that, what have we been building, or what have I been building? I have been building nothing because I have been moving. However, I am successfully in my new location, which is awesome. And that means that there will be plenty of Lego in my near future. I feel so disconnected from the hobby right now just because I've been selling a house, I've been moving for the past month or so, and I've had very little building time. I've bought Lego, I've gone to the Pick a Brick, I've gone to the Lego store, but I have not clicked together pieces. I've done some digital designs with my Lord of the Rings mocks. I've continued to work on those. I've just finished Emon's Hen, and I am moving on to a Mines of Moria mock that will be bigger than the dioramas that I have been done. I've got a new kind of diorama size I've been working with. That's a larger scale model. It's not necessarily that same diorama style that Lego's done. I do want to work on one of those kind of on the side as I work through Mines of Moria. I kind of like to have a smaller sub project going on just in case you get kind of writer's block or builder's block on one project. You can kind of pick up the next project, and sometimes for me anyways, as a builder, I get into like a creative flow, and I just kind of start building, and you just can't stop me. And other times no matter what I do, I can't put together the pieces right. So I like to just have something I can kind of shift my attention to should that go awry with the kind of main thing I'm working on. But it's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be enjoyable, so making sure that it's not frustrating, I think, is really important to me. It's okay to get frustrated, right? Pressure makes diamonds, right? People like to say. But I also like to have fun. And when you work a stressful job, it's nice to make sure your hobby is something that you enjoy. So that's what I've been working on. I'm not sure what that diorama will be. I'm definitely doing Mines of Moria. Like I said, I'm just getting started on that. I've got the base all done. But the classic 8x16 or 8x32 style diorama, I'm still waiting for inspiration for that. But with that out of the way, let's get into some exciting Lego news. Exciting Lego news. All right, so first up, not a ton of Lego news. Obviously, we're still waiting on like the modular announcement for this year. But really, that's, I think, the biggest one that we're waiting for between now and the end of the year. Otherwise, just a few sets here revealed. So Speed Champions, the Time Machine from Back to the Future, the beloved tropical aquarium. That was sarcasm. And then the gift with purchase, and then the Disney classic animation scenes gift with purchase as well. So let's dive into these today. The Back to the Future DeLorean Speed Champion scale. I think this is much beloved already. I think this is an instant classic. Personally, I'm not a Back to the Future person. I mean, seen it, like it, understand why people love it, but it's just a little bit before my generation, unfortunately. So I'm not an 80s baby, I'm not a 70s baby, but that's fine. I know a lot of people really like this, and I think this is a welcome Lego set, especially considering the last couple DeLoreans have been larger scales. It's nice to get one that's smaller, super accessible, right? This thing's going to be, less than $30. So that's great. You're going to get a couple minifigures. It's Speed Champion, so you know that build's going to be good. And it's a huge, huge upgrade from that original Lego idea set that was done quite a few years back now. They really, I don't know, dare I say, did not do a good job with that idea set. The fan design was way better than the official one that was released. So this is nice. This looks really good. I think a lot of people are going to like it. Like I said, instant classic, there's nothing more I can really say about that one. There is, however, a lot, or maybe even a little about what I can say for this tropical aquarium. And I even texted Wes to make sure I got his opinion, because I don't think we're gonna have any breaking news or controversial opinions on this podcast today. But yeah, if you didn't know, this tropical aquarium was revealed. It's $480, so $500 for lack of better. It's $500, and it has 4,154 pieces. A ton of cool pieces. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this is a set that, had it been priced at, I don't know, $300, and by $300 I mean like $279.99 feels a little bit better. There's a lot of useful black bricks in it. There's a lot of really cool colors, right? Like the chef hat recolored in that dark purple. Ton of the mop heads recolored. I mean, there's some good pieces here, but that's about it. I'm not really sure whose this Lego set is for. And again, going back to what I just said, a lot of good pieces here. There's the 16 by 16 plates in medium azure. I use a lot of those in my mocks, right? There's some really good fish builds. There's a good little crab build. I mean, there's a lot here. It's fairly big, right? But it's also pretty hollow because it's a tank. So it's just a framed tank with a bunch of coral and stuff on the inside. And it looks good. It does look good. There's nothing wrong necessarily with the design. It's just a $500 Lego fish tank. And it's funny. So I asked West, I said, hey, what's your, what's your take on the aquarium? Is it going to be who is this for? And he said, yeah, for real. And it's way too expensive. It's just a $500 dust collector. And I would add a inconvenient dust collector at that, because if this thing collects dust, it's going to be a pain, an absolute pain to to clean, because it's coral, right? I mean, it's supposed to represent coral. There's a lot of tiny little cracks and crevices in here. So it's got that like gambit piece colored in that bright light yellow. I mean, it's got a lot of the opalescent, some translucent green. I mean, again, it is a great piece pack. And when you have a piece pack, you do not want to be spending top dollar or buying those pieces at an inflated price because it's from a super large set, right? So unfortunately, in this case, you're honestly probably better off just buying those pieces on Bricklink, hoping they get to pick a brick soon, and then buying them that way if you like these pieces. Because I don't know, let's say you want these not lavender, but dark purple chef hats, and I think the set looks like it comes with 20 of them or so. You can buy them for what, 16 cents a part max, probably, right? Maybe we'll say 30, right? $6 for 20. $6. You don't need to spend $500 on this. In fact, I would not personally. If you like this, if you're a marine biologist and you love this, by all means, buy it. Don't let anybody stop you. But I bet there's a lot of people, and I know there's a lot of people just from looking online and listening to what others have said, that are sitting here wondering who this set was for and what's up with it. So if you have any opinion on it, let us know in the comment section, because it's definitely different. I don't even want to say Lego is out of touch with their fans, because the idea of a Lego fish tank is one that's actually sold well before, right? There was just 5 years ago, I want to say now, 5 or 6 years ago, they had the smaller Creator 3-in-1 set, but that was like $40, right, for a smaller fish tank, and that was actually pretty good. I think it was 60, but that was a pretty good little build. That I would get, right? That I would get on impulse, right? You go to the store, oh, this looks fun, build it. But you're probably not gonna go to the Lego store and say, oh, this $500 Lego set aquarium fish tank looks fun. Let's do it. The only real way I could see anybody really, really, really advocating to get this is, fish are hard to keep alive. You also can't really have a 20 to 10 gallon, sub 55 gallon saltwater tank. And so this is obviously a lot smaller than a 55 gallon, probably closer to a 20, 18, 15 gallon tank. And, maybe that's the rationale for getting it, but you could still get like a freshwater tank for less. There's obviously upkeep and all that. Maybe you kill the fish, right? Maybe you get it for your kid because they really want a fish tank, and they'll just get tired of it, and you don't want to have the fish die, so you get this instead. There's a lot of justification going on to justify this set. The gift with purchase also is interesting in a bad way. We're usually not so negative on this on this podcast, but I guess we are today. The gift with purchase is not the best. It is a tank filter and some fish food. I don't know. It's just like, I guess it's realistic to have a fish tank filter, but at the same time, it's not really an exciting part of the fish tank, right? Like, that's the fish, that's the coral, that's the stuff in the tank. Like, that in my mind, that's like a Speed Champion set, and then you get a gift with purchase of like a gas canister. Like, it just, I don't know. It just seems kind of random to me. It goes with a fish tank, but it's just not exciting. So I think it's a miss too, to be honest. What would have been cool is, maybe if the fish had some exclusive prints or something. They're obviously brick built, but maybe they had some different scale prints, maybe an exclusive fish or two. That, I think that would be something that would get me excited as a gift with purchase. But miss of a set, miss of a gift with purchase, in my opinion. Let us know yours in the comments below. Not a miss with a gift with purchase is this Disney classic animation scenes gift with purchase. We don't have final details on it yet, but it is a just smaller kind of TV type of build, classic, I think it's a CRT TV build with some different scenes. So you've got Toy Story Comes with the Woody minifigure. You've got Lion King. It comes with the Simba, and then it comes with the classic kind of Disney logo with the star shooting over the top. This looks pretty good. It looks like it is gift with purchase on the Disney store right now if you use code GIFT. And it will also be on lego.com, but we do not know when. So I do like it. It's $130 threshold right now. So if that's the same on lego.com, that'll be great. Because typically when they say Disney, that's got a wide range. Star Wars, Marvel, etc. We don't have those official details yet though, so do keep your eye on this one. And that about wraps it up here for the news. Let's go ahead and move over to today's topic. Today's topic. All right. So this week we are talking about monster fighters. And speaking of monsters, West has joined the podcast. Just kidding, West. Glad that you were able to squeak in a little bit of time here in between taking care of your sick daughter. So as I said up front, West may or may not be able to join us. We held off as long as possible. And West, you're here. So let's talk monster fighters.
Let's do it. And Grinch, thanks for holding down the fort and taking care of the news this week. And the listeners haven't reached this point yet, but also the brick mail, which I appreciate. But yes, I'm here and ready to rock and roll. So let's talk monster fighters.
Well, speaking of rocks, moonstones, West, why don't you, what is monster fighters?
Yeah, so for everyone who's sort of not initiated in the theme, Monster Fighters was introduced in May of 2012. To
2012?
10 sets have been released. If you go onto Brick Economy, they list 13 sets. So I think there's some...
I believe it was 10 at retail.
Yeah, discrepancies with some promos and other kind of shenanigans there. So it looks like there were a few promos. But 7 of those sets contained at least one moonstone, which was pivotal to the story.
Pivotal.
And in the background story, the monsters are attempting to collect these moonstones to unleash doom on Earth by eclipsing the sun forever, allowing the land to be bathed in darkness, giving the monsters free roam to terrorize at will. The stones are based on the monsters contained in the respective set. And then there's a band of monster fighters led by Dr. Rodney Rathbone, who try to find the stones before the evil Lord Vampire uses them to eclipse the sun.
So for all the Gen Zennials, Gen Alphas out there, it's hidden side without the phones. No, I'm just kidding. It is interesting. So the moonstones were a big, point of this whole line, and it's funny because you said there's 6 moonstones, right? Or sorry, 7 moonstones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. There are 6 moonstones, and there are 7 sets that contain at least one containing all the moonstones, which was the castle, I believe. And another set contained none. And interestingly enough, that set that contained none is the most popular set of the series. But Wes, why don't we'll talk sets, we'll talk monster fighters. Let's talk a little more about the characters. Why don't you break down some of the characters for us?
So the characters can be kind of broken down into the traditional Lego theme of heroes and villains. So for our heroes, we have Dr. Rathbone, who we already talked about, Anne Lee, Major Quentin Steele, Frank Rock, and Jack Mick Hammer. Some very strong hero names there from the Lego creative design team. And then for our villains, we have Lord Vampire, Lord Vampire's bride, a mummy, a swamp creature, a
Not a
crazy
mummy,
scientist.
the
Oh, apologies.
mummy.
The mummy. This is sort of
Okay,
giving
thank you.
the whole Paramount Monsters series that sort of crashed and burned a few years ago. You know, that cinematic universe. But we can get
Yeah,
to that later.
I believe they're rebooting that,
Oh gosh. Okay.
or maybe they're just doing the Mummy 4,
I think that's getting rebooted. Yeah.
which it was Universal, not Paramount. Which I found out too. I was randomly listening to something about this, but like they don't actually own the rights. Oh yeah, because Guillermo del
Interesting.
Toro's Frankenstein's coming out, but yeah, they don't own the rights to those classic horror characters. It's like for whatever reason, the movie studios are just like, yeah, you guys got those.
Huh. I mean, at this point too, as we've talked about in the past, I'm sure they're in the public domain. So
Yeah, I mean
I don't
it's
know if
vampire,
anyone
like
could.
it's Dracula, it's
Right. Even
the mummy,
Frankenstein, I
it's
think, is old
mummies.
enough that like
Yes,
you don't.
100%.
Yeah. Anyways, let me finish up with the villains. I got us off track. I'll get us back on track. The werewolf,
I got us off track, West.
ghosts, and then zombies, and that kind of rounds out the villains for monster fighters.
So to
Lord
give them a little
Oh
more
yeah,
flavor, Lord Vampire was a powerful vampire, pestered by his wife to get the moonstones, and that's when he finds out that these are super magical. I mean, we've all been there, Lord Vampire, get it.
the old ball and
But then he
chain.
decided to keep it for himself. Yeah, I mean, geez, I just want to watch football. You got to make me go collect these moonstones. But yeah, no, there were 6 of them, and then when you brought them together, though there was technically 7, it would eclipse the sun, turn the night into forever. The monsters would roam freely, and then Rodney Rathbone put together his band of monster fighters so that they could get the stones before him. And that's Monster Fighters. It did not do well. It failed, which is funny because I don't think these even. They were released in July of 2012. They made it through that season and then they were gone.
Yeah.
And 2012 was an interesting year for Lego because, we'll eventually get to 2012 when we do our full review of the year. But Lord of the Rings came out, right? That was the first year of Lego Lord of the Rings. Also, a little theme called Ninjago came out in 2012, and Monster Fighters. So it was part of this, narrative story arc from Lego, and a few of those themes have lasted a lot longer than Monster Fighters, but it does remain. I don't want to say weirdly, but weirdly beloved by Lego fans.
and Lego themselves to some extent.
Sure, yeah, totally.
Yeah. So this, I mean, it's a very odd theme. July and May seems like a really odd time to release it, and as you mentioned, it really just kind of crashed and burned, and we really haven't gotten a ton since. But
the timing doesn't seem that odd, right? I mean, we get the Christmas Village set in September, right? It gets revealed in September. We get that in October. So, July is August, September, October. We're really not that far from a retail standpoint.
sure,
Do you think the timing had something to do with it, or?
I think it does because I don't think people buy sets in October like they do in December, right? So I think, or at least rather to say, people don't buy sets leading into the Halloween or Hallows Eve holiday if you celebrate quite the same that people buy sets leading up into Christmas and the winter holidays. And so I think this one probably could have performed better if you really tried to lean into the Halloween themology and release it around them. I mean, I'm sure, hindsight being 2020, they probably could have done a little bit better of a job of lining it up for release. I guess is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and we, last year we did our kind of like, why does Lego always fail at spooky sets? So without going too much into that conversation, I think part of what we talked about was like, is there the same pull to Halloween as there is something like Christmas, especially from that seasonality like you're talking about, right? It's just kind of a day. Now, I would argue that, I don't know about you, but like I see so much more Halloween decorations these days than I ever used to. I mean, there was, back when we were growing up, maybe one or max two houses in kind of the larger, not the sub neighborhood, the larger area, right? Now it seems like there's, a few houses in a neighborhood. You go down the street and you find some Halloween stuff. So, and I've lived a few places since kind of growing up, quite a few places. Add another one to the list. And there's certainly regionally, it seemed like the Midwest gets really into the Halloween compared to the East Coast. But do you think some of that's changed? Do you think that maybe should this theme be re-released? I mean, we just saw the Creator 3-in-1 haunted house, obviously hearkening back to the haunted house from this theme. It's for all intents and purposes, it's done pretty well, right? There's quite a bit of hype, more hype than the fish tank for for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're onto something, Grinch, with the both maybe a regionality aspect to that, but also generational shift as well from like how we have celebrated Halloween from the past and kind of into the future, right? And I mean, if you shift back even a few years before then, there was like a really kind of odd scare in the United States comparing things like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff to like devil worship and whatnot in like the 80s, right? And that was something that you saw in like Stranger Things kind of pop up as sort of a theme in the last season. And the kids are outcast, right? But things like Dungeons and Dragons are cool now, and that's like something that people are a lot more open to sort of acknowledging that they enjoy versus back in the day. And I think by and large we're seeing a lot more of that sort of acceptance of that kind of thing kind of play out.
Yeah, Weston, I would agree, and I would even go as far as saying even since the Hidden Side came out, it's a little bit different. I think it is about time here for Lego to really give another good attempt at a horror monster type of theme in Lego, and we'll talk about what that might look like towards the end of the episode. So let's get back into monster fighters themselves here. So some kind of like fun facts here. I think one of the coolest things is that they brought back the glow in the dark ghost, and they recreated it right from the classic castle. I think it came out in the 1990s. So we got a new ghost mold, which was very cool. We've seen it since then, but definitely better and newer glow in the dark type plastic that was used. Really helped with that. What other kind of fun stuff do you remember from Monster Fighters?
Yeah, so I mean, this theme really tried to do something that Lego hasn't done before, right? By explicitly tying in, much like when I was going back and reading some of the contextual elements of the theme, one of the things that came to mind was a little bit of like Johnny Thunder, a little bit of Rock Raiders, and you see sort of classic Lego storytelling in the creation of this theme and the creation of the story, right? There's the hero, there's the villain, there's sort of the thing that's in getting in between the two of them, and each kind of has a story and an arc, a narrative arc that they're trying to sort of achieve. But the interesting thing with this theme is all of the villains, like we mentioned, kind of tie back into classic movie monsters, right? The swamp person, the mummy, Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, right? Like all of these sort of, you know, monsters from the golden age of Hollywood right now are back onto the screen. And so I thought that was a really interesting connection, but one that when I'm looking at the sets doesn't really come across as like, silver screen, right? Like they seem to have their own distinct language and visual like representation and stuff. And that sort of goes beyond that in a really interesting way. So as I was looking through the images, I kind of felt like, well, that was an interesting fact, right? Like at the same time too, I didn't really get that in the sets themselves.
Yeah, and it's funny you actually mentioned that because the first time they did like a werewolf, for example, was actually the studio lines, right? They actually did literally reference some of that silver screen classic horror villains, right? That you were mentioning in old Lego sets. That was back in 2002, so this was 10 years after that, right? And but really we just don't get a ton of these. And so to take a step back here, kind of behind the scenes, the designers of themselves, of the sets themselves, actually said that they were really looking for a, quote unquote steampunk Halloween movie, which I think would probably tickle a few people's fancies. They had actually even had a set planned or a concept for a flying airship. So again, harkening back to like Johnny Thunder with the blimp and stuff like that, right? It certainly would have given that steampunk vibe. But yeah, that was cut, unfortunately, because of budget reasons. But then to take it a step further, Dr. Rathbone's character was rumored to be descendant of Johnny Thunder himself, right? And that would have connected it to that adventures theme. And then we later got kind of confirmation of that in the 2020 Fairground series Haunted House, right? With all those references, Dr. Rathbone was one of them, kind of connecting him with Johnny Thunder. So what other, we talked, it kind of missed at the time, but it's been, I mean, shoot, like most people know what Monster Fighters is, right? And looking at some of the set prices on the secondary market, it's sought after. So what other influences has it gone on to have, or any other pieces of the legacy that we missed?
Yeah, so you mentioned the fairground set, right? So that was one haunted house. We have the new creator 3-in-1 haunted house that's come out. The haunted house from this series is extremely sought after. So you see sort of a spiritual successors to each of those. The other thing that I saw when looking through these sets is you can see a lot of DNA shared between these sets and the Hidden Side sets that came out in 2019 and 2020, right? And so I think it's fair to call, pun intended, this is the spiritual successor to Monster Fighters, or Hidden Side was the spiritual successor to Monster Fighters, right? Taking it in a whole different direction with augmented reality, but still you can see some of those castle sets are sort of similar. The vampire direction was sort of similar in some cases. And I think there even was like a reference to Moonstone in Hidden Side, if I'm not mistaken. We don't need to necessarily dig deep for that, but there were some, interesting connective tissues between both of these themes.
I just kind of realized something that's kind of interesting. Like everybody has heard of Frankenstein, right? And werewolves and, the mummy type of stuff, right? Like we know these things, right? You mentioned they're on the silver, like they're these classic universal pictures from like the 30s, right? Like it almost feels like this is the same, right? In a weird way. Like it's kind of this theme that everybody's heard of. Some people probably have the haunted house set in their top 5 Lego sets. Some people's probably their favorite, right? Like this theme, everybody's familiar with it, but like at the same time, like I don't own any of them. You don't own any of them. Like I don't think I've ever even seen the 1930s Frankenstein, right? Like I don't actually think I've seen a lot of these movies, and I said it up front and didn't put 2 and 2 together, but like Universal doesn't technically own the rights to those monsters, but like everybody just kind of lets them do it because they were first to it, right? Kind of like Disney and Cinderella, like you associate it with Disney, even though it's just a classic fairy tale story. So it kind of really feels like this is the Lego theme version of that, right? Like something that everybody knows. And it's just kind of old and there, and it happened, and everybody likes it, but they still, we're not getting a Frankenstein movie every single year, right? We're not getting these Monster Fighter sets every year, so
Right.
just an interesting parallel.
Well, and like you said, I mean, I think there's a larger connective tissue there between how we have approached this. I mean, I think there's no better way to describe Halloween than a holiday these days, because at least in North America, as soon as the back to school stuff gets taken off the shelves sometime in late July and August, it's like Halloween, halfway through August, Halloween crap is everywhere. So it's become sort of this like unstoppable juggernaut. And I think, again, right, like we're seeing this resurgence, but like most of these things, it's based off of these characters that we're all familiar with, but like we don't necessarily have direct interaction with it, right? Almost, it just sort of a really odd situation there with, and an interesting parallel that you made.
So it's a great series here. It also is the only real Lego theme we've ever had centered around monsters, purely monsters, right? We did have Hidden Side that was more of a ghost that was centered around, the 2 characters, but this was purely, through and through a monsters theme first and foremost. Yes, we had the heroes, but the villains really felt just as important. And for example, I can tell you the villains. I can't tell you the heroes of Hidden Side, right? So you might be the only person in the world that can, because I know you're a big fan of it. But this is truly the first time and last time Lego really focused on those classic horror icons. So let's get into the sets, West. I don't know about you. There's a lot of sets here to talk about and talk through, and then of course we'll get into some of the data. But what sticks out to you?
Yeah, well, and like you mentioned, this was the last time. We have seen monsters featured in like CMFs since then, and kind of preceding the series. So
which also like didn't do super well as like a CMF. I remember, I think it's changed, but for the longest time, you could pretty much get the entire series for what you would have if you bought it retail.
Yeah. I mean, I remember getting the Mummy one way back in the day. I think it was from CMF Series 3 or something like that, and just not super impressed.
Oh, they did Series 14 was its entire monster series.
Yeah. And when I was referencing is usually in some of the older series, you could get a monster, right? But it wasn't like its own thing. So, but we've seen other CMFs again, right? Like we've seen the Dungeons and Dragons CMF that released last year. So we're seeing again, I think, a resurgence in this. But I think we've mentioned that, and you asked me about the sets and what stood out. So I mean, first and foremost, the Haunted House stands out as I think just a wonderful set.
Really,
it's a great building. Kind of done in like a Victorian style, 3-story tall building. It looks like an easy inclusion to like a modular city if you wanted to take it that direction, but at the same time too kind of stands on its own. Because that's such a low hanging fruit, I just wanted to kind of talk through a few other ones. Again, as you look through these sets and you look at sort of the visual language of all of these sets, I don't know if I would necessarily categorize it as steampunk, but again, like we talked about, there does seem to be a real interesting connection between this and Johnny Thunder. So we have sets like, the vampire castle kind of makes sense, right? Like that's the big bad fortress for the vampire guy. But we have like the ghost train, and it's got its little airplane, and then there's a zombie set, and there's the werewolf set has kind of a similar looking car to what you would maybe see someone like Johnny Thunder drive. In fact, visually, again, the DNA between these two series looks very strong based off of, because it has that same sort of 1930s grill piece up front that was sort of, I think, originally introduced in the Johnny Thunder line. This is a more modern take on that piece, but this sort
is
of
a modern version, yeah.
Similar piece there, right? And then there's that little gyrocopter thing in the Mummy set, right? So again, just it seems really similar. There's like an airboat in the swamp creature one, so a lot of similar connective tissue there between those two series.
I would say it feels steampunky. I mean, like look at the Vampire Hearst, for example. It's got some Mad Max vibes, and the set that's just called the Zombies, which is like a graveyard. It has that pickup truck with, it's at an angle. You see the engine exposed, and it's got a cattle grill, guard on it. So,
I see steampunk as more like 1890s kind of time frame, and so for me,
I get exactly what you're saying. This feels Mad Maxy, right?
Yeah, seeing more of like the 1930s, 1940s sort of time frame does kind of, but again, right, if you're thinking of the silver screen and Hollywood, that kind of makes sense. So,
So, is that the miss? I don't know. I'm looking at some of these sets, and to be honest, the haunted house is timeless. I actually really like the vampire castle, and I think it's interesting, right? They had the MacGuffin, right, in the Moonstones, and all of the main sets, right, excluding, if we exclude the poly bags, right, there was 6 Moonstones, and 7 of the sets came with the Moonstones, and then bam, all of a sudden, I'm sorry, not 7. One did not. 6 of the sets come with the Moonstone, and then the Vampire Castle comes with all 6, right? So I thought that, as somebody who has, bought into the MacGuffins before in different themes, like I think it's really interesting that, the Vampire Castle comes
Grinch,
with all 6. Me. It
kind of undermines the whole thing, doesn't it, to some extent? But also feels very Lego.
We'll get into the data, but like at the same time, like, is this part of the reason they stopped that? Because like the other ones didn't sell as well, right? And we'll get into the data. I mean, spoiler alert, but let's take a step back. Let's talk about this haunted house, because we got to do it some justice. Like I said, I think a lot of people would have this in, if I'm generalizing, I'd say they're top 20, right? Everybody kind of knows that this set. It's certainly one that's up there in their favorite sets of all time. There's quite a few people out there that have it in their top 5, right? There's even people out there that would probably say it's their favorite. So it is a classic Lego set. It's up there with the fishing store, right? It's up there with, Green Grocer, Cafe Corner. Insert your favorite modular here. It's up there with stuff like,
which it's also not
you name
overly
it, right? Rivendell,
done, you know what I mean?
etc.
Like it's not.
It's very
super
simple.
Complicated.
Yeah.
I think if you were to part this one out today, that would not be a challenging build.
I think it would, because of the sand green, my friend.
I was gonna say other than the sand green, but I'll throw that out there. I'll leave that as a caveat.
Big asterisks on that one. And then the windows, the brown windows are hard to come by, and the the light tan bush piece, those get pretty pricey these days too. Yeah. But specifically, I think the sand green would be tough. But aside from that, what was really unique about it is it was enclosed, right? And up until this point, really the only enclosed buildings that we got were modulars, right? They were built on a base plate, totally enclosed. And in this case, it was hinged closed. So it was really designed to be a place set, right? And
Right.
I think this is kind of one of those Crusader sets that really kind of paved the way for AFOLs, right? Like this was the AFOL set. Like you bought this because the back was closed, right? Around the same time, they also did the Simpsons sets, right? And those had closed backs. So this was, again, kind of this unofficial black box, if you would, type of set, right? That you'd see on the shelf, like you would today. But the inside, detailed enough, right? There wasn't a ton of detail. It came with that little gate on the front. And I think the minifigure selection here is fine. You get your two main villains, Frankenstein, some zombies, and quite a few ghosts. But what do you think makes this so beloved?
I mean, I think it's the depiction of an old house in a great color that we just have not gotten again in Lego, right? Which I think was, to your point that you brought up at the beginning of the episode, one of the things that made the new Lego Creator 3-in-1 set so sought after, because I remember people going and freaking out on Instagram and calling it out and going, "Oh, it's at Costco," and it's this, and I was like, I'm not really sure what I see in this, but I also don't really look back on this theme with like a lot of nostalgia, and so for me, it just sort of over my head, which is totally fine. But, I think there is, looking at that building, I can see why someone would see that and go, oh, that would be a really cool inclusion in like a city or something. I guess that's where my mind goes, right? So seeing sort of kind of some of the modern Lego collectors who've kind of commented on it or have included it in their collection, it makes sense in my mind for that purpose.
Yeah, and to that point, I have seen people recolor this, right? Like I think purple comes to mind. I've seen people do that because it is just a good Victorian style house overall.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of those sets in Lego, much like not necessarily the Birch Books portion of that modular, but that house that came with Birch Books, where you could see various versions of that set recolored and include, a bunch of those in a city or something. If you were trying to build out, bulk up a city, for example, with, something that just sort of fit, right? Like this would make sense. I could see something like a dark red would look good on this haunted house.
Sand blue.
Oh yeah, sand blue would look good. A dark blue would look really cool. Like you could really kind of play with some of these colors on here and really find some interesting variations.
Yeah, and this too, neither you or I actually own any of these sets, right? So, disclaimer. But I do feel like this was
now that you've listened this far.
This set was out at a time where Lego was definitely starting to focus more on AFOLs, focus more on the larger sets, but also, we got Lord of the Rings, right? I remember seeing it on shelves, but when I really got back into Lego, it did seem like there were just those sets that every AFOL would get, right? Something like the oh god, what's that bridge in London?
The Tower Bridge.
I wanted to call it the Bay Bridge. I'm like, no, that's in Maryland. The Tower Bridge. There was like that set, right? Like these were some of those sets that like you just got because you just wanted the cool big set for the year. And like this was kind of synonymous with that, right? Like this year it was Lord of the Rings, some of the Simpsons sets, like this was that one-off set you got. And I think you see it in a lot of AFOLs collections because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to put it. It did retail for $180 back in the day, so this was
a
not
great
a small
deal.
set. Yeah,
but it was from a price to part ratio, from a price to part Chad over here. It was still a really good deal. $180. 6 minifigures, including those Ghost, right? More than 2,000 pieces on it. So it was just one of those sets, right? It's just one of those sets that you got because it was cool and it fit that AFOL collector mold.
Right. Absolutely.
Something I think is really interesting, and I didn't do this. I'm kicking myself, but maybe I'll try to get Brick Economy pulled up really quickly because anecdotally, West, I feel like this set has not really changed much in price over the past 5 years. Because I remember when it came out, our data here has it at $400, and it's still right around that range. It's still at $400.
Yeah, I have Brick Economy.
It's been a really slow increase.
Yeah, and Brick Economy actually is putting it closer into the $500 range right now. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, and remember, they do value, right? They do absolute value. I don't think they actually necessarily look at. I think they look at what's on the market at a given time versus what's sold. But don't quote me on that.
They have a bunch of links to eBay and Bricklink. So, but it is. I mean, according to this, right? Some of the retail, what people are asking for it is starting to pop that $500 range. The Bricklink's got it somewhere between $599 to like $570. eBay, it's anywhere from like $540 all the way up to $599. So it's definitely up there. But your point, I would say, stands pretty fairly if you look at the trend data. And they have it doped out from 2024 to basically now. And the line is relatively flat. In fact, if you look at, they actually even can go back further than that. From 2016 to about 2020, it was pretty consistent and flat around $400 of value. It wasn't until 2020, somewhere between 2020 and 2021, that it actually started popping up into that $500 range on. At least
which was
according to Brick Economy.
When we saw record inflation and you saw a lot of collectibles go up in price because everybody had these stimulus checks and but it hasn't changed much since then either.
No, right? And in fact, much like before, that line from 2021 to present is relatively consistent. And it looks like, interestingly enough, the value of it increases, at least for the last few years, as we approach the end of the year. So it seems like as we get into October, people get very excited about it, and then demand for the set drops off after the holidays and then slowly grows as the year goes on. So I think that's kind of funny. And if you look at it, it's pretty consistent from 2022 and onwards that the set, it gets more expensive the later in the year it gets. So.
Well, and this is actually the one set that lasted more than that next calendar year. I think they all were retired after that next Halloween, but this one actually stayed on shelves for almost 3 years, a good 2.5 years. So it stayed on the shelves the longest, right? So it's interesting that it does feel like it really hasn't changed much in value. But let's talk through the other sets, and then we'll get into the rest of the data. West, I don't know about you, but like these sets feel old. Like I'm looking at the werewolf, and like that tree is pretty rough.
I mean, I think these sets suffer from the same thing that like the original Lord of the Rings sets suffer from, which is if you look at them sort of objectively from today,
you're about to suffer from the head down.
I'm right. If you look at the modern Rivendell set, and I know that they're scale-wise considerably different, but you look at the original Rivendell set from the Lord of the Rings series, those are not the same set. And
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think
my kids are beautiful.
It's funny because we look at Lego in like 1999, especially from like like an IP based, process or sort of lens, right? That's sort of, as we've talked about in previous episodes, that major inflection point where Lego started to then break off and really engage in building out based themes, right? Those sets look extremely rough. You look at the original Anakin's Pod Racer versus the 20th edition in 2019, 20th anniversary that came out in 2019. Those are two very different sets, right? I mean, wow, the difference between those. But we also seem to forget that, like, in 2012, right? And I think you and I are, as for listeners who are younger than both Grinch and I, and we're in our 30s, your 20s and 30s go by very quickly. And you look back on it and you're like, man, I can't believe that was 10 years ago. And now you're like, man, or 15 years ago, right? And so 2012 for us was 13 years ago. These sets look 13 years old right now. And I think for us, like, it 2012 still feels relatively recent. And so we're like, how do these sets look so old for, that wasn't that
These
long
sets
ago.
look 20 years old.
And then we, take a step back and we're like, actually, that was pretty long ago, relatively speaking.
Actually,
and,
wait a second. We're old.
Yeah, Lego's come pretty far since then. So it doesn't surprise me, I guess, is what I'm saying when you're saying, like, some of these sets look pretty rough for what they are.
Well, and for example, like the zombies set, right? It's this like weird pickup truck steampunk thing with some big hammers on the side. So as you roll it, the hammers kind of turn, right? And smash, smash, smash. But then it's a couple of graves, and the coffins are literally just a bare 2x4 plate on the side, a bare 2x8 plate on the side with a 4x8 plate on top, and it's a coffin. Like, you would not get, in today's world, like, even looking at, thinking of was it the Harry Potter
that graveyard set?
I forget. Yeah, the graveyard set. I forget what it was, but it came out with Voldemort. I think it was 2019 or something like that. It was when they did that first reintroduction of the Goblet of Fire. Even that tombstone was better. Even the the tombstone, the coffin from Mines of Moria is better than this, right? I mean, this is really simple. I think you were supposed to put the zombies in and smash and open up, but like, this is pretty plain, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I mean, the sides of these quote unquote coffins do leave a lot to be desired, right? And it does beg the question of what was really the point of their inclusion. So it's an interesting, yeah, like you said, these sets are a little rough around the edges.
Well, and I'm glad we're talking about this theme, because, like, in a vacuum here, it's a little bit wild, and I'll tread carefully because I know a lot of people love these. Taco, I'm thinking about you right now. I know you love this theme. Haunted house, awesome. Vampire castle, awesome. Ghost train, that's pretty great. But, like, take a journey with me to a set 9462, The Mummy. It comes with the Mummy, our female protagonist, who's got a arrow thing in her hair. Pretty cool hairpiece, right? It clips on with the arrow, and she's got a crossbow. But then the Mummy comes with a skeleton horse-drawn carriage. So it's like a, which I guess maybe ancient Egypt mummy, but then we've got what looks like a McDonald's Happy Meal toy helicopter, like the little helicopter from like Far Cry 4 that you could fly around in. It's pretty pitiful being nice. It's pretty pitiful. I could say a lot worse things about this helicopter than that.
Have we
it's
seen
just that
horse piece ever reused again?
Yeah, I figured you were going to ask that. We did. I think it was in something else. if you talk about the set a little bit, I'll find out.
Well, I mean, I'll keep building off of what you're saying, Grinch. Like,
oh man, pun intended, huh? Lego building
there you go.
off of.
Yeah. It does. It feels weird, right? Because it's this sort of skeleton drawn chariot that the mummy's on, which, sure, is a thing, I suppose, if you want it to be a thing. You've got the moonstone, right? And it's got sort of the hieroglyphics on it and stuff, which is kind of cool. And then you've got sort of the main character in this case. And I think this is Anna Lee. Yeah. Monster Fighter Ann Lee.
Uh-huh.
But she's got this spear that's in her hair. It's like a hairpiece thing. And it seems like an odd inclusion. It would make more sense to see her in some like tan clothing, right? Assuming that she's fighting this mummy in the vicinity of Egypt, I suppose, right? I don't know. It just, the one interesting thing about this set is that the skeleton horse actually glows in the dark if you look at the box art. But to your point, Grinch, like it just does feel a little haphazard in the design, and the gyrocopter thing just doesn't quite make sense. Yeah.
And hey, I'm all for small set. I mean, like the swamp creature one it's got a pontoon boat and a little build. And to answer your question, Wes, yes, that horse was exclusive to the set in the glow in the dark white. In fact, it's most of this set's value today, about half of it. Any growth is certainly attributed to that, right? Otherwise, if you get rid of that, it's retail.
Was it reused in Harry Potter as the
correct, in black? Yep, yeah, as the Thestral, I think those were called. Yeah, and Thestrals. Then they even had him in white as a skeleton horse in 2007 in the Castle Fantasy. So it is a reused piece. It's just exclusively in that color. But yeah, I mean, the swamp creature set, it is what it is, right? It's a smaller set, little kind of polybag style pontoon boat there. But yeah, then you get to the vampire hearse, which is, I don't know, it uses that old windscreen piece that was just always way too small. You know what I'm talking about? Like the half windscreen. It's an interesting hearse build, to say the least. Get to the zombies. For something that has so much identity, I feel like a lot of these sets lack identity, right? They just kind of feel like this hodgepodge, but like for me anyways, horror is something I want done right. The gimmick is the classic horror. I don't think we need this steampunky type of vibe on top of that, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And I think that's why you see a set like The Haunted House doing so much better than the rest of this theme, right? The Vampire Castle, there's a weird, car in it, but the rest of it's actually really good, right? And I think when we looked at Hidden Side, this was actually kind of the one set that they did revisit, pretty much not copy and paste, but there was a large inspiration from this set and a Hidden Side set as well that looked really good.
And that Hidden Side Castle set, that was the one I was thinking had something to do with the Moonstone. And so I apologize because I was looking that up. I don't think there's much of a connection there. But I think, again, right, if you see sort of visual connection between Johnny Thunder and Adventurers and Monster Fighters, this is where we start to see, even with some of these vehicles and everything else, a little bit of connection between Monster Fighters and Hidden Side, right? Whereas what I think Hidden Side did better, if I may, is even though their vehicles are kind of dialed up past, 211, they do feel a little bit more grounded than the Monster Fighter vehicles that we got. Seeing something like the Hidden Side Ghost Train or like the school bus or the fire truck, right? Whereas with some of these, they're just kind of really wacky and way out of proportion. Hidden Side seems to be like a little more polished. Yeah, they're, hot rodded up or whatever, but like, it doesn't feel like it sort of hasn't crossed that uncanny valley, right? Of like ridiculous. You still sort of see what they're trying to to show. This hearse, right? The car in the vampire castle from Monster Fighters. You're not really sure what that ever was beforehand, right? Whereas like if I could maybe design a set for Lego in this case, I would think like the Ecto 1 car that they had, that was that a Lego Ideas set? I don't recall.
The
Maybe it was the
original one
one
was, yeah.
yeah, and I think they came out with another one that came out with the fire station, right? I think there was a smaller kind of, maybe not, right? But
if I recall, the smaller one was the idea set, and then they came out with the bigger one, right?
okay, and I think that might be it. If
Yeah.
you could take like an old Cadillac like that, which in the theme of Ghostbusters, I believe is an ambulance, right? That looks almost, turn that black. That could be your hearse, for example, right?
Uh-huh.
And you don't need to add, just like the sides coming way out of proportion and it all hot rodded up and stuff like that. Like you said, the monster is the thing that should be the focal point of the story, not the side build or the vehicle, which sort of takes away from the monster itself.
It's interesting. I really like that what you said there, and you don't hear me say that often. What? No, I'm just kidding. As your brother, that pains me to say.
Oh dear.
That hit too close to home. That's why Wes laughing. No, but I truly did, because the haunted house, we talked about it, right? Like you can buy that set because you like the house, right? Maybe you're a Norman Bates fan, right? And you liked Bates Motel. Like that is the house from Psycho, right? That is Norman Bates' house, right? It's this classic Victorian. You have got a city, you can throw it in there, right? You want to get this and then recolor it 16 different colors. You can do that with, something that is a little micro case study here. Lego Overwatch. I looked at Lego Overwatch and I said, I played that game. I like that game. I want to buy that set, the El Dorado Showdown, because it represents that game in Lego form.
Yeah.
You looked at that set and you said, that's a really cool old, 1960 pickup truck. I want to get that set. I don't really care about that other stuff, but like I'm going to use that. With these, aside from the haunted house or aside from the vampire castle or maybe even the arguably like the ghost train, you're not looking at this like, man, I've really been wanting a steampunk hearse. This would go great in my hearse collection. Like, oh man, this zombie set. Like, I've been wanting a truck with some hammers on it. You don't look at these sets and you do that, right? You do look at the haunted house, right? So maybe we just cracked the code of how to make a successful and scalable Lego set. But it kind of feels really similar to the some of the Marvel sets that they used to do, those comic book ones back in the day, or heck, just any, quite a few of the Marvel sets, to be honest. Like, how many times have you heard, oh, I get it for the minifigures? Right. Unfortunately, in this case, these aren't, well, I think they're cool. And I think they, I'm surprised they're not as desirable minifigures. They're just kind of not, right? They're these, half of them are going to be these named characters and half of them are going to be, potentially a weird take on a classic horror,
and this goes back to thinking about what makes classic horror successful, right? You're taking something very basic and you're adding an element of unknown, of mystery, of something ethereal and unworldly, right? Like it's a monster, but it's not a monster in like the monster's world. It's the monster in our world, right? So one thing is different. And what makes those movies so interesting is you're seeing how everyone reacts to that weird situation or, that different creature in that environment, right? Like the creature from the Black Lagoon. Oh, it's that lake, the one out by, out beyond the school or whatever, right? Like everyone can think of that lake and that's where the creature from the Black Lagoon lives, right? Like it's sort of like that situation where it's so ordinary and then they subvert the ordinary, and that's where the tension comes from. And that's where I think Legos really messed this up, right? Because everything is subverted and exaggerated in these sets to a degree that, again, going back to the point, you're losing sight of the monster itself, which really should be the focal point of the set.
Mm-hmm.
It's how the movies
you
work,
didn't.
and it should be how the Lego sets work, which, to your point, right, I think is why the Haunted Mansion is so popular these days. I think you nailed it, like, because it's so ordinary.
In an extraordinary way, right?
Well, could you imagine, like, for the Ghost Train set, it's maybe something like, was it the Independence, the one from the Lone Ranger? The Constitution, right?
Constitution.
Something that looks almost like the Constitution.
Good patriotic reference.
Fair enough. It was close, right? Like, just tangentially, right? No, the Constitution train, right? It's just kind of this old Western train. Think of something like that in black and like dark bluish gray with some of those glow in the dark accents on it, right? Like, you don't have to take this thing and go above and beyond and turn it into this like overly weird. I mean, I think the one from Hidden Side actually did really well with like the main train engine in that Ghost Train. If you didn't extend and deploy the wings in it that turned it into the monster, like, it looked like a normal train for the most part with the train station and everything else, right? And again, this is where I think Hidden Side just did a lot better, because a lot of those things looked a lot more approachable and ordinary at first glance. And that was sort of one of the, I wouldn't say gimmicks of Hidden Side, but I think, you know, clearly was something that Hidden Side did a little bit better than Monster Fighters.
If we are still doing this podcast in 13 years, I'll be really curious to see how Hidden Side performed versus this. Because now I've got downloaded data from this series, and it'll be frozen in time. So, you know, we'll be able to see, right?
Yeah. And who knows, right? I mean, maybe in 13 years, the Gen Z generation who were in high school and early college years, or, you know, or even the younger, maybe Hidden Side becomes super sought after, or certain of the Hidden Side sets become more sought after for the very same reasons we're talking about for Monster Fighters right now.
The West, it's going to take longer than 13 years for anybody but you to like Hidden Side. Also, clearly trying to manipulate the Lego secondary market over here. He's about to pump and dump the market. Anyway, if anybody's looking for some Hidden Side sets, I've got some. Sorry. I mean, yeah, dude. Remember the school bus Hidden Side set? I'd spend like $500 on that thing. I heard nobody can buy it anymore. It's like super rare. You said you had some for sale. So, all right. Jokes aside, Hidden Side sucks. No, just kidding. What West is saying is he just wants a more grounded horror experience, like shooting ghosts with your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, hey, in all seriousness, you could say that's also why Hidden Side failed, though, right? Because it was
absolutely
overtly gimmicky, right?
Yeah.
In both these cases, it's kind of gimmicky. And look, I know there's a lot of people that really love this haunted house. I do too. It's a really good set. If it wasn't $500-$600, $400, I would, you know, if it was on the shelf today, I'd buy it. I don't love it enough to go and spend 2-3x times retail at the time. But if this was one that they remade in like a Pirates of the Barracuda type style, I would certainly, you know, pick it up. But let's get into some data here. So we see kind of our classic Lego distribution of sets that you don't typically see anymore, right? All of these sets came out in 2012. There were the 9 retail sets. I believe one of the poly bags also became retail, but in total, there was 13 sets, 4 of those being promotional poly bags. Of those 9 sets, you get a distribution of sets between $7 and $180, and a few options in that kind of, 30 to 50 range, and then a few options between 50 and 100. Good price to part ratio overall. The average price to part ratio here is guess what, 10 cents per part. The best being the werewolf set, the worst being surprisingly the mummy set, and unsurprisingly the ghost train wasn't worse, because I feel like anytime you've got train on a Lego set, it's got a bad price to part ratio. But West, what stands out from the data for you?
I mean, the big thing that stands out from the data, and going back to as we were kind of looking through the sets again, was just, man, I miss the smaller Lego sets. The ones that were at retail $7,
$100,
$11,
$200.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. $50. But this
the
feels
small
more.
ones.
This feels more like classic
Takes
Lego.
you 6 hours to build.
Where you have sets ranging from $7 to kind of the big set, right, which was the haunted house at $180. But you didn't have, if you looked at like the Marvel 2025 set, data for just the sets, or Star Wars 2025 Star Wars, prices, for example, right? You're not getting a $7 set. You're probably not even getting a $20 set.
You're getting a microfighter.
Right.
And a brick head.
Well, exactly, right. But you're not getting, something small. The battle packs are 20 plus at this point. Some, closer to 30 than
at this
they are
point
20.
They're 30, 40, yeah.
Right. And so we just don't see these small sets anymore in this type of distribution. And so, okay, great. Battle packs, let's call them $30 today, right? The next biggest set is probably like the $100 set. You're not seeing a $70 set. You're not seeing. So it just feels like the middle in a lot of Lego themes these years, like more recently, has been completely eroded. And it's like brickheads at the low end. I mean, Lord of the Rings is like the most extreme example of this, right? Like, you want a cheap Lord of the Rings set, great. You can go get the brickhead, or you spend $500. Like, there's really no in between. And for those of us who want to dabble in like the modern Lord of the Rings theme, but don't want to drop that much money on these sets, there's really no way to do that.
Uh-huh.
And that's what really stands out for me, Grinch.
So monster fighters. So I did, to your point, I did adjust prices for inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And, that $7 set is a $10 set. The $180 set is a $250 set. But I think, to your point, you still aren't seeing this distribution of $100, $18, $28, right? 50, 56, 70, 110, 140, right? It's looking at Lego Star Wars. It's, here's a bunch of overpriced $30 sets that should probably be priced closer to 20 or 15. And here's a bunch of overpriced, $180 sets that should probably be priced closer to $80 or $90, right? One of the things I also did was I adjusted the price to part ratio for inflation to give you an idea of what that would look like. And that 10 went to a 15 price to part average. So not to be too annoying with the Lego simping, but the $949 or piece set all of a sudden is $140, and so maybe that isn't incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
Oh god, I hate playing devil's advocate sometimes. But looking at the growth here, the biggest growth, West, is surprisingly the zombies. 650%. It retailed for $39, and it is for sale for $300.
That just seems
and
wild.
Used $200. So, like, we've had this kind of thought that a used set with a similar price as a new set, on the secondary market means that it's a sought after and desired set in addition to being rare, right? People just want the set. Outside from the poly bags, which are a little bit harder to measure, it just because those were limited retail releases. The next biggest set is going to be the Vampire Castle as far as growth goes. And then we've got our smaller sets here too. These are all north of 200% growth. And the other thing I wanted to do and to have a conversation around is I actually pulled the used price and I adjusted that for inflation. So what I did is I essentially created just a pricing index. I just said, if you had the used set, sold it today, would you gain money compared to what you spent on it, or would you lose money? And overall, in all but one case, is you'd actually gain money. So even if you were selling these sets used today, adjusting it for inflation, that dollars for inflation, you would still gain money. So they are keeping pace and not just keeping pace with inflation from a EU standpoint. We've talked about stuff on the show like Throwbots, for example, that you would actually technically be losing money if you sold it used. It wasn't even keeping up with inflation, which I thought was interesting. And then I nerded out and I actually said, okay, what if you invested that money 12 years ago in the S&P 500? How much money would you have today? And well, let's just say it would be a lot more than the sets. Actually, just kidding. This was an example of where it was slightly less. So you'd actually have $300 less than if you took all the sets at retail, put that money to the S&P 500, or bought them and then sold them today. Now, there's some big caveats there. Obviously, you have to pay taxes on that money that you invested. You also would have to pay like seller's fees, shipping, etc. Could risk not selling them, so on and so forth. So it's not that cut and dry, but we often talk about Lego as an investment. So I thought that was an interesting thing to pull. West had to hop away because he was dealing with a sick child, but West is back. And West, I think we're going to wrap up the show now. Closing thoughts here. Two things. What, does having this conversation, how do you feel about Monster Fighters now?
I mean, looking back at this series, I see a lot of reasons why people really like the haunted house. No, I can see why people are nostalgic for it. I think, listeners who haven't heard our episode about why we think the Halloween themes struggle in Lego, I think this is a really nice companion episode to that episode itself. And I think the same sort of issues are there, right? But to the point that you brought up pretty early in the episode, I think we're due for a good, solid, horror Halloween-based theme here in 2025, 2026, 2027, and 2026 or 2027 at this point. It's always
or
fun
2028.
Yeah, absolutely. Lego explores some of this stuff,
or
right?
even 2029.
And I don't need, something overly gory with vampires or whatever, but like these are fun themes. I think there's a lot to do here. Lean into like the silver screen aspect of it, right? Lean into the ordinary nature of it. I talked about this in Hidden Side, but the thing that when I saw Hidden Side, what it reminded me of most was like Stephen King and Stephen King's affinity with Maine and Stephen King's, movies and series like It. And I think there's a new It based TV show called Derry that's coming out or something like that. But they're revisiting the town in like the 1960s. And I saw a lot of that in Hidden Side. I just, like you mentioned and like we talked about, it felt like things were still dialed up to 11. Lego, dial it down to like a 6 and let the monsters do you know, the talking. And I think that could just still be really, really fun and ordinary. And I do miss Lego's storytelling that they do for non-IP based themes. And while these are classic horror movie monsters, right? You can see Lego still trying to like do something with their own story here, and I really appreciate that. And I think that's really cool. And it'll be fun to see something in the future kind of along those lines. So that's my takeaway. What about you, Grinch?
If you want a good Stephen King show that I feel like is underrated, watch Castle Rock on Hulu.
Oh, okay.
You just honestly can probably just watch the second season because they're pretty standalone-ish. But I really liked the second season. But
Yeah.
anyways, what do I think? I like this. I like Monster Fighters. I know I ripped on like one or two of the sets, but overall, big tick from me, as Brickman would say on Lego Masters Australia. Haunted House, great. Vampire House, great. Ghost Train, pretty good, right? I had no idea how the zombies is $300 on the market right now.
Yeah, that's wild.
The rest of the sets,
wild.
You get for the minifigure, you get to complete the story, right? There's probably some, they're homely, right? They're face only a mother could love in some regards, but they're your monster sets, right? As far as how I think Lego should kind of, I deal with this in the future, right? I would love to see maybe, a set a year like we do with, the Winter Village, and just do, if that's the Dickens Village set, right? Do a classic Halloween spooky set every year. Put it in the $120 range, right? Just like we do at the Winter Village. And, maybe it is a take on the Ghost Train or a Mummy, but just have it be grounded in that kind of, whimsical horror aspect of like the Dickens Village, right? Like the Dickens Village is still based in reality. It's not necessarily a real item. It's not fiction. It's not nonfiction, right? It's fiction. Do the same here, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, some of the charm of those original horror movies where it's this mad scientist builds Frankenstein, right? But it's still people dealing with it in today's world. It's not this giant, it's not Frankenstein in a fighter jet, right? The Frankenstein 22. It's raw, it's real, right? It's grounded in reality. The obscure thing is the creature itself. And I think if they did that route, you'd find people that, like the sets for various reasons. So that would be, my Lego pitch, or my pitch to Lego on how to deal with these sets. I don't think you need a full narrative. I mean, go back. We've talked about my idea for a narrative driven, monster theme in the Hidden Side episode that we did. And I'll leave that there, but essentially it was just, hey, let's have two characters go through kind of these timeless Americana horror, go down to Louisiana and the Bayou, go to the Midwest, right? Go do Mothman and West Virginia sort of stuff. But yeah, I think with these, really celebrate the characters because that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah. And I think that all of that could still be really interesting, right? There are like local horror legends all over the world, right? And so you could lean into that a little bit, and you could do stuff from Europe. You could do stuff from North America. You could do stuff from, Asia and stuff like that. The Middle East, right? South America. There's so many different things in real life. And maybe that is the monster fighter or the monster hunter, right? Is like, it's a team of people and they're going to like investigate paranormal things, and you could set it all over the world, right? I mean, you could have the monster fighters trying to, like the El Chupacabra escape or something like that, right? And you could create your version of that. Like, I know that sounds kind of silly, but like the Mothman thing would be really interesting. And if you don't want to like tie it down, right, you could kind of make some adjustments to the story or whatever. But like, I just think that would be really, really cool. And I think people would be really into that. I think it would be a hard sell though, kind of to sort of red team our own idea, to tell Lego to like dial it down. You know what I mean? Be like, just make it an ordinary school bus, Lego. Like, you don't need to add extra fender flares on the back and jack up the wheels and, add all of these fancy colors. Like, I don't know if Lego would quite buy that, but at the same time too, if you had like intricate like play features, or your minifigures and your monster all had kind of a collective story together, like, I think that again could do more of the showmanship than the build itself necessarily.
I've got two more closing thoughts as we round out the conversation that have come to mind as the wheels are turning here. Number one, I think the takeaway, unfortunately, from Monster Fighters and from Hidden Side has been that there's no market or there's no appetite for a scary horror-based theme. And I'd say there's no appetite for a full 10 wave, right? 10 set wave. But I think there's certainly appetite for, like I suggested, one set a year, right? And to your point, keep it simple. One of my favorite games is Phasmophobia. And in that game, all you're trying to do is identify the type of ghost. You can't hunt it. You can't, kill it. You don't fight it, right? It's really simple when you boil it down to, like, you're going into a room and you're just like, okay, is it going to do this? Is it going to do this? Like, can I get the evidence? Is it going to be ghostwriting? Is it freezing? Like, it's so simple in that regard, but also that's what makes it terrifying, because you can't fight it. It hunts you. You have to just hide from it, right? And I think, to draw the parallel to like how to implement that in the Lego set, like, keep it simple, right? Make a really compelling, haunted ghost train so that it's good enough that train lovers buy it because it's a train, and it's cool enough that you get it for the ghost train aspect, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this crazy out there thing that you're spending $100 on just to get a couple of wheels so you can go totally custom the other way around. I think the Constitution was a perfect example of a set that's an old steam engine locomotive set coming to life. And sure, there was some weird stuff to it, like the giant Gatling gun on the back, but it's easier to get rid of half of a car, right, than it is to be like, well, I'm not actually going to use all of this.
I mean, think of something like a downscaled Orient Express, but like the windows are smashed out, and like the bed inside of it, and like the car inside of it, things are broken and torn up, or they're old and worn out, and just like, it looks like it's come from the past, right? Like, that could be your ghost train. I think that could be really fun. And it's something where, like, if somebody really wanted to, they could replace the windows with non-smashed windows. They could rebuild the couch or whatever, and now they have their own thing. But at the same time too, like you said, right, like it sort of serves multiple purposes. And I think that's more of like the grounded thing that modern, well, I can't speak for the entire Lego community, but I just think that would be something that would be really cool, personally.
And that was today's topic. Let's go ahead and move over to Brick Mail. Brick Mail. All right, so that was the topic this week. let's get into some brick mail. Up first, we have Crow Girl 9833. I do think in general the mini doll body type limits it a lot. To use an example you used, to have proper dolls for Lord of the Rings mini doll line, they would have to produce new body types for the hobbits, dwarves, and probably the orcs. For the others, it's mainly the height, but the skinniness of the body is really less versatile than the minifigure body. And I think the thought of mini doll orcs exemplifies this, as they would look a bit shrimpy and maybe even a bit anorexic. Thank you, Crow Girl. Not to mention, they would also just look a little bit silly. I think the mini dolls arguably, right, works for something like Wicked, because it's kind of more of a fantastical story, and I understand Lord of the Rings is also fantasy, but maybe there's a little bit more of a serious, less whimsical tone with that franchise compared to Wicked. But yeah, it's funny, as I was reading this comment originally, I was picturing, when you said orcs, I was picturing a mini doll orcs in my mind with, a skitty little orc with kind of maybe a tooth sticking out of one side of the face. But got these big kind of like beady eyes, and yeah, it just good example there for sure. So thank you for writing in. Yeah, I think to your point, yeah, definitely would not work. And Lord of the Rings is a really good example. I think it would be weird for something like Star Wars too, just because that IP is so ingrained. I think really the only time mini dolls works would be in a franchise that you're okay with things looking a little bit more whimsical and, dare I even say, goofy, right? Like um Marvel. I don't want to say like Marvel, because I know I'm going to trigger a lot of people, but when it comes to Marvel, they've got like the Spidey and the Amazing Friends sets, right? They actually did the DC superhero girls for a while as well, and that was mini dolls, and that didn't look out of place. So, I just said Marvel though because I had my daughter at an appointment, and on in the waiting room they had, I don't know, Disney Junior, whatever, Marvel on there. And it, I'm sitting there like, well, this is silly, but it didn't look out of place, right? But it definitely looked silly. But it looking silly wasn't an issue, right? It just, I was like, well, this isn't the Marvel I know, right? But I wasn't like, well, this just looks weird because it's Marvel. So I hope I'm articulating that well, but yeah, this is a perfect example where this would just look weird and not work, right? So absolutely great example. Thank you for writing in. Up next, we have Tanner C. They say, recently discovered this podcast and really enjoy the brotherly discussions y'all are able to have and share. Re mini dolls. My two biggest criticisms are the lack of articulation compared to minifigs and the lack of body diversity. Say what you will about the height to width ratio, but when looking at the doll as a whole, the waist is as thin as the head is wide, contributing to the thin appearance. I do agree with Wes that nothing is lost with the addition of the dolls into the Lego system, though. Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I don't think West or myself were necessarily advocating for a mini doll over a mini figure. Obviously, we're both big fans of mini figures, but we were just kind of pointing out some of the facts there, right? Like, well, actually, technically, they're a little bit more to scale with the human, but they've got a thin appearance. They look weird. Kind of like I was saying too, you can't really print well. I mean, you can print on them, obviously, but I feel like you lose a lot of those type of details, those printing details when it comes to mini dolls. And yeah, the articulation is definitely no bueno, right? Especially, when you've got posing, right, with the two legs, stuff like that, that sort of thing just doesn't work well in the mini doll world. But we had a new commenter, Tanner. Thank you for commenting, and really glad that you're enjoying the show. And thank you for adding to the conversation with your comment. So And that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at afolswelcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.